So good afternoon, everybody. As Thomas said, my name's Amanda Crowfoot. I'm the Secretary General at VUA, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel discussion for the next hour or so. So what we'd like to do in this session is really explore in a bit more depth some of the issues raised in the NEWLEAD project, and also to look a bit beyond this in terms of what's actually needed in the future in terms of leadership development programmes. So, as we've heard several times already today, European universities clearly face a multitude of challenges. In the last year, as we've already said, we've had COVID, we've had a war in Europe, we have a war in Europe, we have the challenges of digitalisation and artificial intelligence, and lots of things that really are huge challenges from a leadership perspective. And navigating these absolutely needs good leadership. As Thomas has also outlined, as we saw during the NEWLEAD project, you need a really complex skill set to actually be a leader in this environment. We also know that leaders come from many different backgrounds, have lots of different expertise, work within different national systems, different institutional systems, and address things in a variety of ways. We've also heard that the playing field is very uneven across Europe in terms of what's on offer in this area. So I think there's lots of things we can really get our teeth into in the next hour. So what we're going to do is look at the topic from a variety of different perspectives, both from a kind of personal perspective of university leaders, looking a bit about the national context in which people operate, and also looking very importantly at the wider European policy context of the topic. So I'd like to introduce the three panellists for this afternoon. So starting at the far side, first I'd like to introduce Lamri Adoui, who represents France Universités, which is the National Rectors Conference of France. He's a professor of atomic physics who has been president of the University of Caen-Normandy since 2010. Then our next panellist is Hans Adolfsson, who is chair of the Association of Swedish Higher Education Institutions, which is the Swedish National Rectors Conference. He's Vice-Chancellor of Umeå University in Sweden and a chemist by background who was previously Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Stockholm University. And then last but by no means least, Sophia Eriksson Waterschoot, who is Director of Youth Education and Erasmus Plus in the European Commission's Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. She's had many different roles within the European Commission, but currently manages the Erasmus Plus programme and the European Solidarity Corps, amongst a number of other things. So this is our panel for today. We will, as Thomas mentioned earlier, have time for your questions and discussion points at the end of the session. But I'd like to start with a few questions for the panellists. So the first thing I would like to ask is a question to our two representatives from universities and university associations. So in the presentation earlier today, you heard that the NEWLEAD project has identified a number of different leadership skills that are necessary. And I really wanted to explore a bit how this relates to your own experience. So maybe if you could explain to us how you've grown into your role and kind of what helped you along your journey in this context. So Hans, let's start with you.
First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation to come here and take part of this presentation and also to be part of the panel. I think in academia we are quite, we should be rather happy because the system allows us to also to grow as leaders. You can become a leader rather early in your career. In fact, if you're a researcher, you start your own research group, for instance, then you're automatically getting into some kind of a leadership position. So there we are, in fact, helped in a sense to sort of have a good entrance into leadership. And then, of course, looking into all the different skills that you need, it's something that you can, if you're sort of interested in that, you can develop that over time. And just as Thomas pointed out, and as the project have shown, you need a lot of different skills as well in order to be, I would say, well, it's hard to say if you're going to be a successful leader, but anyhow, if you're going to be leading an organization, on different levels. So it's something that you can develop over time, I think.
And the same question to you.
So first of all, I want to thank the European University Association for this invitation and to give me the opportunity to participate to this panel. Obviously, as has been reminded by Thomas, we are currently in a very complex context, with the international context, of course, but also with, for example, for France, national reforms succeeding one another, directed by the ministry, with very limited financial autonomy. With the problematic of multi-campus universities, what means that we have to articulate excellence and proximity, which is not incompatible, but this is a challenge. And we know that this very complex context, we have to add and to tackle, to address the issue of all the transitions. What means ecological, energetic, digital, societal, which allow and which need new ways of thinking, and so a strong leadership. Given the diversity of the challenge, I would say that it's natural to have a very complete set of skills that is needed, as reported by this NEWLEAD project. I would say that for the skills that are needed, it depends strongly on what I will call the starting point. What means the experience that the leader has already built up before taking his role and prior to taking this role. Even if there is no single profile that can succeed to accompany their community along the path of transformation, I would say that this is an asset if this leader has a strong commitment in the field of research. Because I think that if you are connected to research at the best level, you have immediately at the outset the fact that you think already at a European, at international level. You have the use to lead some teams. You have already some experience in project management, for example, which is nowadays very important. So I think it's really an asset to have a strong connection to research. The second thing that I would like to say is that probably at the outset also, we are not equal in the field in terms of human relations. And I think it's very important because for me, it's very important to listen. It's very important to be empathic. It's very important to like people. And I think that this is not a hindrance or a reason to stand still. On the contrary, I think from my point of view, this is really a very important point to try to get the community on board. And today's university community accepts someone who makes some mistakes rather than a leader that does not take decisions. And I think, but of course, it will follow a leader and a management team all the more it feels it is sincere, honest, and effective. So I don't know if I have some time to speak about my personal...
Yes, of course, please, go ahead.
Sure. So just a few words about my personal case. I became president of University of Caen 3 years ago after 25 years of career. And I can divide finally these 25 years in 4 different periods. The first period, 15 years long approximately, was only dedicated and most exclusively dedicated to my research activities. And I am an experimental physicist, and I have traveled on many large-scale facilities, and that gave me an insight into different systems in international context. Secondly, in parallel with these activities, I was asked to take on administrative responsibilities in the field of research, what means participation to the CNRS National Committee, management of a doctoral school, vice presidency for research at my university. So it means that it allows me to work on the organization of my institution, but also to understand the challenge of innovation and to discuss, for example, with the economic sector. Then in 2015, I was elected president of a regional coordinating body, what we call COMU, in France, for all the higher education institutions for the Normandy region, what means 3 universities and a lot of engineering schools. And that gave me the opportunity to get to know the elected representative of local authorities and also various players in civil society. So it was a gradual process that enabled me to get to know all the partners in the territorial ecosystem and to take up my duties as a university president in 2020 under the right conditions. So to conclude, I think that a learning process was built on through successive experiments rather than through an organized training session. Of course, this does not mean that training is useless, on the contrary, but I think that we'll come back later on this point of trainings.
Thank you so much. Hans, does that kind of, do you recognise a similar sort of journey for yourself?
Yes, I did indeed, in fact. And I think that's exactly what you just pointed out, is that, I mean, you learn through your career, basically, how to act as a leader, or you learn different skills, so to say. And I did a similar journey, perhaps more focused on education, because I was the director of studies rather early in my career, along with being a researcher. And I'm a chemist, as you pointed out earlier, an experimental chemist. So I've been running a research group for a bit more than 20 years. And being, running the group, and then at the same time also taking care of the educational programs at, in that case, Stockholm University in chemistry, taught me a lot about how you interact with people and how you can also manage to set up things like that. And after that, I became the Dean of Chemistry. I became the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Stockholm University, and then eventually moved to Umeå, being the Rector or Vice Chancellor in Umeå. Not something that I really looked up into, and not something that I had planned in terms of a career step, but rather things that happen along the line. And it was sort of, once you get into leadership, it grows on you. I must say, well, at least it grew on me. I think it was interesting, and to be part of the system where you could also influence how the system would evolve and how you could develop things. And I think that's really been sort of triggering me, just as it is important for me when I'm a scientist to develop things within science. To see how a university can be developed is also an important and an interesting thing, and an interesting aspect from a leadership perspective.
Great, thank you so much. Sophia, I'd like to ask you now whether or not you'd like to share with us some of your initial reflections on the results of the NEWLEAD project from what you've heard. So is there anything there that particularly surprised you in terms of what we've done or what we found?
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks for bringing this topic on the European level. I think it's a very welcome and timely topic. Well, I was thinking, before I come to the surprise, I was thinking of this transformative period that really we are all in, and certainly also our universities. And it can be the big transitions, the green, the digital. We've gone through pandemic. We have the geopolitical context. But we have also set ourselves in motion with very ambitious initiatives like the European University initiatives. And all of this somehow triggers a need for transformation. And when it comes to the university alliances, I think at this point in time, we can say we kicked it off in 2019, although we know there are some alliances that came a bit later. But we're really coming into this, if I can call it a second phase, where all the plans, the long-term strategy that was set out, it's now time to make it very concrete and make it owned by the whole university. So I think that is, in a way, what I see when I observe many alliances that I think about today. How are we making it now to the next level? And certainly what we hear a lot, how are we making sure that the whole university, all faculties, all staff members at all levels are feeling this ownership. And I think that is so interesting and very challenging, clearly, that when we are at that stage of time or that period of a rollout and so on, we cannot manage if we don't have a strong institutional leadership. And I think somehow when I see the conclusions that this NEWLEAD study is drawing, it's confirming all this. And it is very interesting, and I couldn't help making this comparison that when you are concluding in the recommendations and the conclusions that we need a diverse skill set, for example, well, that's exactly how our European University Alliances, what we are discussing there. We want excellence, of course, but we want inclusion, and we don't think it will work if we don't have a diversity also in the types of institutions, but the diversity needs to be inherently in how this is being led. And also the fact that this is not something that we are born with, and I think that's what you have been saying. It's a learning process, and somehow that also embodies the whole idea of the European University Alliances, that we are taking steps and we learn along the way. But what is the common denominator if we don't have a strong leadership, and if it's not owned also at the top level? I think it will not thrive and be a success as we want. So I think that's an important point. Now the surprise, well, the biggest surprise I thought was that I think the number was 60 or 7%, that in terms of priority, yes, it's very important to have a strong leadership development programs and so on. But there are still quite a number of systems that do not give priority to this. So there I think we certainly have a major gap, because if it's not the system don't give priority, and we know it's needed to take the next steps for transformational change, well, we do have a real issue to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually a really nice link with my next question, which is exactly this. So as we've seen from the NEWLEAD project, lots of leadership development is supported in lots of different ways, and that lots of systems don't have formal programs. It's really not the norm across much of Europe. So I wanted to explore a little bit, Hans and Lamri, how this looks in your system. If you could describe a little bit how the support system works. Is there anything already in place at your institutional level or at national level? So kind of how is it dealt with in your context? So Lamri, I'll ask you to start on this one.
Yes, so if I compare the situation in France to the situation just presented in the field of the NEWLEAD project, I think that we are rather privileged at the national scale thanks to the work of France Universités. Of course, it doesn't mean that there is no room for improvement. In concrete terms, France Universités provides support for new presidents through the cycles of subject as varied as, for example, budget construction, the relation of the president has with his management team or deans, for example, and also organize some major training sessions. These training courses, which can be followed remotely, consist of some 2 or 3 2-hour units, sessions that are run by very experienced presidents. More recently, France University has devised a training program on environmental and societal transitions with 4 2-hour units for all the presidents on the challenges posed by the twin transition, and on all the dimensions, what mean training, research, campus life, management, and so on. So we can perhaps have a few lessons that can be drawn from this. First, we need to be prepared to increasingly difficult situations and with a need for innovative solutions. So implementing this will require strong involvement and leadership and innovative solution. Second, all academic trades will be impacted and will have to commit themselves. Yet, I think that commitment culture on environmental issues remains low in most French higher education institutions. And third, probably there is a need for a multi-annual blueprint with milestones and indicators. And we have to be careful that not to be too technical especially for training our students. So there is additional needs that have been recently identified, for example, on the case and the topic of cybersecurity that have been evoked a few minutes ago. To date, 8 French higher education institutions has undergone a cyber attack over the last 4 years. And so that no later than last week, France Universités produced a note dealing with the various hazards that threaten universities with, of course, ransomwares, but also to give some recommendations about the part of the university budget that should be allocated to protection from cyber threats. So these training sessions are very useful. Because they help presidents to get on grips with their new position, because they enable them to share common and concerns, and also because they help to strengthen the collective of presidents that participate in small variable geometry groups and getting to know each other as they take their duties and interact with each other for several years. However, all these training are not sufficiently well attended, as presidents are rapidly caught up by their duties, and probably they not have enough time to follow this training and the time need for training and reflection about the practices and the missions.
Yep. So the challenge is having yet one more thing to do, effectively. Sure. Yep. So Hans, what's the situation in Sweden?
Yeah, if I look upon it from the national level, we do have within the Swedish Rector Conference a couple of programs that we run. As pointed out in the presentation, we have one program on the rector level going for newly become rectors at the universities. And that's a program that runs for about a year with about 10 occasions that you meet for 2 or 3 days at a time, discussing various issues. And it's a very good program for setting the stage for becoming the rector in that, basically getting through all the different kind of things that you can expect of meeting sort of in your daily life as the leader of an institution. However, a program which I think is perhaps even more important is the program that is below the rector program, the program that we call HELP, which is a very suitable title for a program as well. It's higher leadership program, and it's directed primarily towards not the top level leaders. So it's not rectors, but it can be vice rectors, it can be deputy vice chancellors, deans, and also the head of administration at the universities, so the director of a university. And the fact that this program, it's run in a similar fashion, so it covers different modules over time and is run for a bit more than a year. I think it's 10 occasions that they meet together, starting out in the middle of the week, typically on a Wednesday, and ending up on a Friday. So there is plenty of time for reflections and plenty of time for discussions. And just to have that mix of people with different that comes from different universities. There's only one person per university that can participate in each and every of these programs, meaning that you can speak very openly and speak very frankly about things, and you can share ideas without having anyone criticizing you from your own organization, so to say, which is a good thing, I think. And also, what is an important thing there is that you will learn to see how different things are when you're on different levels within an organization like that. So if you're, for instance, if you're a dean at one university, a smaller university, it can be completely different from being a deputy vice chancellor, for instance, at a rather big university. But you get to see these different perspectives, and you learn a lot from that process. So I would say that program is often sort of the entrance port to become a rector eventually. And when I took that program, I was coming in as a dean of chemistry, and I ended up as being the pro vice chancellor of Stockholm University, and it sort of it took away the drama, so to say, from also becoming a leader, because you learn and you could see that others that participated in that program, they were just human beings there as well. So that was a very important thing for me, just to sort of lower the threshold. And I think that's the same for quite a lot of people. We also do have a program from the Swedish Rector Conference which is directed toward administratives. And that's also a good thing, because it's run in the same fashion that you have only one person per institution that can go into such a program, and they will learn a lot from each other as well. And you create networks in that sense. And that's another good thing. You get a good field that of people that you can easily just contact if you run into something. You can just pick up the phone and you can give that person a phone call and say, well, I'm having a difficult situation here. How should I solve this? And you can get advice on that from them. Very, very good, I must say, to have that. And then coming back to the institutional level, in Umeå, we do run a couple of different programs as well. We have one thing we call Introduction to Leadership for people who are just going into position. And then we also have a longer program, which is for typically heads of departments and so on, and to help them, assist them in their way of becoming leaders.
Great, thank you. And it's interesting that you highlight that peer learning, peer support aspect of things. Sophia, at European level, we know that obviously the Erasmus Plus programme already provides opportunities for peer learning in lots of different areas, but obviously doesn't at the moment support formal leadership development programmes. And obviously we have clear recommendations in the NEWLEAD project about this. So I wondered, a very blunt question, do you see a possibility for some form of financial support in the future? And if so, what do you think that might look like?
Thanks for the very direct suggestion. First of all, well noted for the discussions on the future of our Erasmus Plus program. I think it's very pertinent. I think there's a lot already that we can help with now. But I must say that, of course, one should not, in my view, consider that this is kind of replacing the gap that I mentioned before. I think it's so important, and I want to emphasize it. It must be an institutional and national strategy priority. Otherwise, and there must be funding, and that goes with it. Otherwise, the European level is not going to replace that, and it puts it in a very biased way. But of course, we assume that it's there and the willingness is there, because also the NEWLEAD study showed that the willingness is somehow there. And if that is the case, well, the European level can certainly facilitate and help and push things in that direction, and certainly look into the transnational cooperation, the peer learning you mentioned. I must say the NEWLEAD project in itself is a great example, because we are supporting these kind of innovative and sometimes evidence-based research and projects under the more cooperation partnerships under Erasmus+. But we shouldn't forget also the mobility factor. I think we could do better in terms of the staff mobility in institutions. We think a lot of the students, perhaps on the researchers, but everybody else, sort of the staff, and including, why not the leadership mobility? I don't think we have any exclusion criteria. I'm sure this is actually possible already now. So I think one can also look into that. Peer learning should, of course, continue in terms of these type of NEWLEAD projects. Maybe there is a follow-up projects needed. Perhaps we also can work more on peer learning together with member states, because in the end they are in charge of the system. So if this is an interest, I don't know if there are any member states in the room, but it's an invitation and certainly something that we can bring forward, because this topic we will come back to, I am sure. If we come back again to the European University Alliances, there we have some really interesting practices already ongoing. I think there are numerous examples of, for example, for centers of professional development, and there are some innovative initiatives taken. So we should also look there and ask the alliances that are willing to share. And I also dare to say, and I'm looking now at thinking of the Spanish presidency, I think there are some good Spanish examples of how this is also integrated in the system and some alliances across the board. So I would say yes, everything is possible for the future, but let's not forget what we can do already now. But maybe we are not using the potential in terms of funding and activities.
Thank you so much. And just sort of building on that a bit, obviously the European strategy for universities sets a very ambitious agenda for universities and talks a lot about the importance of flexible and attractive academic careers, and leadership is just one part of that. So I wonder, just in a kind of broader context, could you say a little bit about what you think the Commission can do to support universities' agenda?
Yes, no, and we have some news perhaps to share. In the European strategy for universities, we already mentioned that we need attractive and sustainable careers. This is absolutely essential for the transformative process that I also mentioned before. So we proposed, or we suggested there, the Commission is ready to work on a kind of European framework for such attractive and sustainable academic careers. Now things have moved on, and if you have been able to look at the Commission's work program for next year, you will see that there is an intention to go further and first of all take the next building blocks or next steps for doing a joint European degree, but also that this is of course accompanied by a number of aspects. And one of those aspects is, and we see it more and more, we have to be able to valorize the work that academic staff is doing, for example, on the alliances, on the joint educational activities. So the topic of, I would say, flexible, attractive, sustainable academic career is very high on the agenda. So without saying what the content of all this will be, I think it's again timely with your input here, because if this council recommendation, which will be the format of our framework, I think we should have an angle there on the institutional leadership and the key role. And I would even suggest to use some of the insights that the NEWLEAD project has given us. It's very valuable for the work for us to take it forward.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then just a last question to our two university representatives before I open it to the questions from the audience. So you've both talked a little bit about what's in place at the moment within your systems. Could you say a little bit about what you think is missing, what you think else is needed, and specifically what you think EUA might be able to do going forward? Hans, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, I think what really could be helpful is the modules that we do not cover very good ourselves, is to really have it as a complement to what's already is existing. And one area which I think we are struggling a little bit, at least that's my experience from the different programs I participated in, and that is the internationalization and sort of getting an international perspective. And I would say that EUA is very much suitable for giving that. For instance, EU policy, governance on the EU level and things like that, that would be very helpful to have that as a module coming into and being a complement to the system that we have, both in the, what I say is the help program, but also on the rector level.
Thank you. Lamri?
Yeah, my answer is obviously based on the program already made by France Universités, so the needs are probably different from one country to another. But if you want that European University Association has some added value and complementary training, perhaps we can have some propositions. So first, for example, in France, at least we have the position of university president is very exposed. Some years ago, France Université edit a handbook about what we can call the keys to tackle all kinds of legal issues. But I'm not sure that all the university presidents are aware of their legal rights. And perhaps it would be useful to develop legal rights, a legal training of university presidents in Europe. Second point, perhaps it would be very interesting to think together and get feedback of issues linked to Europe's democratic values. And for example, on the values that shape academia, including the mainstay of the European Charter, of fundamental rights, such as academic freedom, for example. We know that there is a measure of the academic freedom index that includes a lot of components, such as academic freedom, freedom of cultural expression, institutional autonomy, freedom of exchange, of dissemination, of research, of teaching, and so on. And I think, for example, we feel it's important to think about the role that university leaders could play in these various issues, what resources they have at their disposal, and what their limits are. So there are just some possible trainings, probably not exhaustive.
Very interesting suggestions, thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience now, both in the room and our online audience. So does anybody have a question for one or all of our panellists? Yes, back there. Oh, there's a microphone will come. And if you could just introduce yourself before you ask your question, thank you.
Sure, and good evening, everyone. My name is Pio Fenton, and I'm responsible for university leadership development in Munster Technological University, which is a new member of the EUA. And the thing that's on my mind as I'm hearing some of this conversation is that leadership doesn't exist in a vacuum. And one of the biggest showcases and tests of leadership is the ability to craft and implement strategy. And I just wonder, from the perspective of your experience, whether you feel that there's enough systemic support to help university leaders in implementing strategy. And I'm thinking, obviously, we have generally quite lengthy strategies, but there's those in business who would argue that 2 pages should do the job, but it's getting it down to 2 pages is where the challenge is. So I'm just wondering about the experience of Lamri and Hans with respect to leading through strategy as opposed to through change and transformation.
Who'd like to start? Hans?
Well, it's tough. It's always, if you want to get everybody involved and everybody on the boat really to go along with a given strategy that you worked out, even if you do it bottom up, it's often very, very cumbersome, and it's something that you need to work a lot with. And I think what really makes it easier if you involve people on all levels, if you can really get them to feel that this is something they also own. And that's how we have tried to work it, at least at our university in Umeå. Really to, when we built the vision of the university and we set the vision for the university, it was of course decided by the board of the university, but it was really a bottom-up process where everybody could participate in that. So they also get sort of an ownership of that vision. And then it's of course much easier also to get that to just sip down into the organization once the decision of such an overarching document has been taken.
Lamri?
Perhaps you have to begin with a clear vision. So it means for me, for example, for our university, it is important that our university was at the heart of its territorial ecosystem. What means that we know that we will have to interact with the economic players, the civil society, the local authorities, because there is no university in the world that succeeds without its territory. So this is the vision, and this is the goal that we have the commitment to work with all the partners. And after you have inside, you have the deans, you have the community, you have the researchers, you have all the people who make the training, who have some responsibilities, and then we have to have all this community on board. So we have to share this vision and to try to that everybody try to share the same vision. So this is 2 different works for me to try to work inside and to have partnership with all the territory and all the difficulties to try to line all this strategy and all these visions.
Hans,
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, you started, Lamri, looking from the outside. What are the sort of expectations on the university, and how will that also affect how you set up the vision and how you set up strategies for tackling all these expectations? And I think that's something that never stops, and it's an ongoing process that we change also over time, especially if you look upon the transformation of society we have right now. There are new expectations on us as well as universities, and that's sort of a constant evolving process which you need to tackle over and over and over again. And to really get that to also go into the full organization within the institution, it's a big challenge, I must say.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
We have online.
Oh, we do online, okay. Yes, we'll have this one first and then online. Yep.
Sure, thank you. Oops, thank you very much, Hoya Onica from ESU, so European Students' Union. So I think you will guess in a way the direction of my question for sure, because we heard about a lot of fundamental values here for a good reason. We heard about academic freedom in the beginning in the presentation, about academic integrity. So I would like to ask, especially for these leadership programs, is there any way that student representatives in the leadership of the university can attend, or are they involved in a way? Because we have the fundamental value of the collegiate, let's say, model of governance of higher education institutions, and I'm wondering whether the students who are in decision-making bodies in universities are in a way integrated to have multiple perspectives, to see the grassroots, to also have the students on board, and to see how to have them in these strategic planning processes.
Thanks for your question. Hans.
Well, I can start out, and I think that's really the big challenge, because the students are changing every year. So I mean, within the student union, the leaders of the student unions are often sitting there being the heads or the presidents of the student union for 1 year at a time, meaning that we have a constant change there. But what we try to do is really to, whenever the fall semester starts and we get the new team in, we bring them in and we give them a good sort of an education on how the university works, in order for them to have sort of a feeling for how the stage is set. And then we involve them in all kinds of decision-making rounds. And I mean, they're basically involved in everything that we do at the university in Sweden.
Yeah, in France, it was not the use to have a lot of students in the governing boards. But for example, in our case, we change a lot, and we have two students, vice president of the university, at the same level as the other vice president, and they change every 2 years. So now we have a really stronger relation with this elected, but effectively they change a lot. But we have these students 2 years in our team.
Thank you. Nino, Anna. Okay.
Thank you very much. Very interesting conversations. I'm Mieke van Herwegen I'm Vice Rector of Ghent University, Belgium. You were talking about internationalization, right? Now, if we want to work on internationalization, we also need internationals in our leadership positions, which what I see from the universities that I know, that is quite limited. Do you have any feelings about that? Do you know how to tackle that? Would you think leadership programs focusing or targeting internationals would be interesting or not? Is that something that is being done at universities at all? Because I don't know any of those in our universities. So that was the general question I wanted to ask.
Well, we have experience in Sweden with 1 or 2 on the rector's level being non-Swedes. It's not very often it happens, but it has happened over the years. It's a bit more common if you look upon people with a non-Swedish background sitting in the leadership team, so it being vice rectors and so on. There we have more experience of it, and that really helps also to bring in new perspectives. And if we want to widen participations, that's definitely the way we need to go, I would say. And of course, that brings in the international perspective as well. So Maybe coming back to what you just mentioned, the mobility of leaders, I mean, that could be something to look into.
Anybody else like to add anything? Please, Sophia.
Yeah, no, just on this, I think this is a very pertinent question, and maybe my reply would not only be that we need somebody with a non-national taking a certain leadership role. I think the fact that we are all exposed or should be exposed, whatever the level is, of some internationalization, certainly Erasmus Plus can help. I think then you will get a culture, and a culture, it's important, really all levels, including the leadership level. And hopefully that will create a bigger understanding of the common challenges and why we're working together, why is this important, and also a bit of a perhaps new thinking. I mean, the way that you describe your ideal model of student involvement, it could also come as an inspiration from somebody who has seen it done differently in another context and be open to actually adopt such practices. So, I mean, there's so many benefits of mobility, so I assume I speak to a convinced crowd, but somehow I guess those of us who have been on mobility, I've certainly been on Erasmus mobility myself. I mean, we have to also act a bit like multipliers in our daily life, professional and personal life, and I think that is it can only create good things also at the top level if we talk again on this transformation process.
Thank you. Nino.
Yes, so I have two questions on behalf of the participants. First of all, it's from Michael Murphy, and he asks that leadership style within universities differs greatly from business, so are bespoke programs necessary to the leadership?
Who would like to take that? Typically provocative question from Michael there.
Well, if leadership programs are necessary, I would say yes. I would definitely say yes, because it's something that we have already mentioned, all the good things that can come out of it. One of the strong thing is really the peer network that you build up. Of course, you learn a lot of things, but having that networking is so important, I must say, from a personal perspective anyhow.
Yeah. So essentially you're saying that a program is about more than the formal learning aspect.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Lamri, did you want to add to that?
The same, yes, it's useful because we have to share our experience. We have to learn about the benchmarks. We have seen that there is different styles, for example, of leadership, and we have to share and to compare these different styles. So to learn something, I think we need some trainings.
Thank you.
May I add one more thing, and that's one thing that I think Thomas touched upon that in the presentation. And often when you become a leader or when you become a rector, you sit there for quite some time. So you have that position for a minimum of 6 years in Sweden, typically a little bit more. Then you also need to talk about the sustainability of you as a leader. And that's also something that should be sort of part of the program. And we do have that in the Swedish programs, discussing various topics on how can you survive as a leader as well, because it's rather lonely at the top often, and then you also need to be aware of that situation and have someone to talk to when things start blowing.
Thanks. Nino, next question.
Yes, the next question is, how do we measure the impact and success of this type of programs?
Please, Lamri.
It's immaterial, so no, I don't know. I have the feeling that we can progress every time that we have, for example, this meeting. The fact to have heard something about this NEWLEAD project make me think about some inspiration. So I think that we evolve day after day. So it's difficult to perhaps to have a measure, an indicator about this success, but I'm sure that it's useful.
Sophia?
No, on that I want to add, I mean, there's no perfect measurement, of course, but the fact, and I'm coming back to the European University Alliances, where we have developed a monitoring framework, and I think some of you have been involved in developing it. And of course, the idea here is to get an idea how things are progressing in the alliances as a whole and in each of the alliances. And it can also be a bit of a benchmarking tool that you as a leader in an alliance can look at certain things where you do well and things where you may want to improve and so on. So this could be a help, I would say, if things go very well in this monitoring framework, at least when we talk about the ambitions of the alliance now. I mean, there are many other challenges and objectives you have to deal with as a university leader, but at least this part, the more transnational component of leadership, I think we have at least one way of measuring it, knowing that it's a very long-term process and nothing changes over a day, but it's not, we don't have nothing, I would say.
Or we just make an examination.
Are there any other questions? I think I saw another hand, please. Yes.
I had a question. Nadine Burkel, I'm Director General of a HUMAIN international network of heads of administrations and leaders, manager of professional services across central administration and faculties, school in universities. And my question to the panelists, to the university leader was, what are you doing? What type of organizational development do you undertake to create an environment, a framework, a culture where the divide between academic leaders and the leaders of professional services becomes more blurred or even disappear, we could imagine, in the future? We discussed this very much in the conference we had a few months ago with EUA. We worked on this with Thomas NEWLEAD, who was very present in this conference. This is also a very important theme for us in our network. We just had a survey on the role and positions of heads of administration in senior leadership teams. Are they second-class citizens, I see sometimes, or do they have equal role, equal weight in the big decision of the university? And Thomas also mentioned the leadership program. We have winter school, summer school. We focus on change, management, transformation, because professional service leaders are very, very important to develop strategy and implement changes. That's very much the focus of what we do. So any comments about the organizational development, because things don't just happen like that. Things have to be organized to make changes in universities. That's very much. Avio, sorry for my long comments and long questions.
Very interesting question. Thank you. Please, Hans.
Well, I think that's one of the major internal challenges we have at universities in order to sort of bring the whole organization along the same line and get everybody to sort of have an acceptance for everybody at the university. What we do internally, and which I also explained for one of the national programs that we do run. But what we do internally at the university in Umeå, we have courses for leadership where we have a complete mix. So there are academic leaders and there are people working as professionals and leading the administration or various parts of the administration within the university. And that is really helpful because you get to know each other's sort of how does the environment look around you, and what can you expect from a person working, for instance, in administration, if you're the head of a department taking care of predominantly research and education. So, I mean, having this mutual learning about what's going on at different levels certainly helps a lot.
Yes, it is clear for us that the head of the administration, what we call, for example, in France, la Direction Générale des Services, is part of the management team and the core team. So it's really very important for us. But when I heard what just said Hans, I think that we have to make some progress because we just begin to try to work together about this kind of training for all the administrative of our university. So I think that we have good trainings, for example, for the leaders, for the vice president, for the deans, but not enough for our administration.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ragnhildur Ísaksdóttir and I am the head of the HR department at the University of Iceland. In the NEWLEAD project, as well as in the University of Iceland, we have been thinking a lot what we can do to support female leadership better. Can you share with us what you have been doing to support female leadership or even diversity in leadership?
Supporting diversity and female leadership. Hans.
Well, we used to have a program in Sweden that started about 20 years ago, if I remember correctly. Marita can tell if I'm wrong there, which was very much dedicated to female leaders and starting to building up a network also to assist and to help that and really to give mentors for female leaders. I think that's a very important step there, really. I think everybody should have the chance to have a mentor if possible, but it might be even more important, especially for people or for I would say the less representative sex in any environment, in fact. But that was a successful program because it sort of it lowered the threshold for quite a number of women to go also into taking up leadership positions.
Yeah, we have a program at the national scale and also at our university to try on the equality, gender equality between women and men. So it means also to try to detect the high potential and to give her and them the possibility to follow some specific training to go to some direction positions, for example. So you are really aware about this very important point about gender equality.
Any more questions? Maybe if I could just ask one last question before we finish. So, Sophia, you've mentioned already a few times the university alliances and the importance of those. And I know both of you come from universities that are engaged in alliances. And obviously, these have new leadership challenges because we're talking about multinational, multicultural alliances. And I wondered if you could just reflect a little bit on your thoughts on kind of leadership in the context of these kind of collaborations.
Well, I think there we really have an opportunity to learn from each other again. So I've been talking a lot about the peer learning, and I think that could really assist us as well in getting to know each other's different cultures which do exist, and that can be very, very much helpful, I think. And there the alliances can for sure play an important role also to get perhaps where EUA could come in as well, to use the alliances for giving specific modules in terms of leadership development.
Thank you, Lamri.
Really stimulating project, and we will talk about that tomorrow together.
We will indeed.
As we are in the same European university project, so we know that we will learn a lot about leadership by discussing together.
Thanks. Sophia, did you want a last word about the alliances?
Well, it's a very positive message we hear, and I must give. I'm really impressed by also the way that you express the eagerness to improve and do better, and I think that's a very important acknowledgement that nobody is perfect, and I think that goes for everyone, and a very positive message. Certainly for the European University Alliances, it's a learning. Community, actually. It's a learning community which have very high ambitions, and I hope we will have also see some systemic impact, and certainly that the leadership, even sometimes leadership change, but we have seen it happen, and somehow the momentum has always managed to be kept, which is a good sign that it has gone down into the organization. But perhaps that is also something to discuss, when you have transitions in this way, how to prepare the new leadership and make sure there is a strong commitment and ownership of this initiative. And there I hope we can continue and support these type of cooperation projects, peer learning, perhaps sometimes also with the member state representatives. So really have the systems represented as well.
Thank you so much. And so I think we will stop there. I mean, I'm not going to try to summarize what's been an extremely rich and complex discussion, because I think that would that's impossible. But I think what I've taken away from this is the fact that yes, there are things going on in this space, but there's clearly an appetite for more to be done. And I think, you've all emphasised, the different systems, the different leadership styles, the different challenges. But at the end of the day, there are some kind of commonalities. And I think, your point, Hans, that it's lonely at the top, effectively, and there need to be platforms to bring leaders together and reflect on these issues and see, how leaders can evolve and we can address the challenges as they evolve. I think that seems to be a very common, strong message coming through today, which I think we definitely take away. I'd like to thank all three of the panellists for their contributions. I think it's been really, really interesting. And also the audience for the very, very good questions, both online and offline. Without further ado, I'd like to thank our speakers and then hand over to Josip Maria Garel, who will finish the afternoon. Thank you.